There was a particular feeling that came with having a few coins in your pocket. Not much. A nickel, maybe, a dime if you were lucky. But it was yours, and you knew exactly where you were going with it. The corner store wasn't far. Never was. You could walk there from almost anywhere in the neighborhood. Past Mrs. Sullivan's house with the rose bushes, past the empty lot where kids played baseball, past the barking dog that was always behind the same fence. The bell above the door rang when you pushed it open. Every time. A small brass bell that announced your arrival. The sound meant you were inside, and the person behind the counter would look up and nod. They knew you, knew your name, knew your family. The store smelled like everything all at once. Tobacco and newsprint and floor wax and something sweet you couldn't quite name. Old wood, dust, penny candy. The candy counter was low enough that even small children could see over it. Glass jars lined up in rows, each one filled with something different. Colors and shapes behind the glass. Some jars had lids, some had scoops. All of them had handwritten labels. Mary Jane's, Jawbreakers, root beer barrels, licorice whips, candy buttons on paper strips, wax lips, bubble gum in bright pink squares, lemon drops, fireballs, Tootsie Rolls. You stood there looking, taking your time. The decision mattered. You only had so much money, and once you chose, that was it. No second chances, no going back tomorrow for what you didn't get today. Some will recall the woman who ran the store near them, or the old man, or the couple who worked together, one at the register, one stocking shelves. They were patient. They didn't rush you. They'd seen hundreds of children stand in that exact spot, making that exact same calculation. 2 pieces of this or 5 pieces of that. Something that lasted a long time or something you could share. Hard candy or soft. Sweet or sour. When you decided, you pointed. 3 of those. 2 of those. The person would open the jar, use their fingers or a small scoop, drop the candy into a small paper bag. Sometimes they'd count out loud. Sometimes they already knew. At the counter, you'd hand over your coins. They'd be counted, change given back if there was any. The bag folded over at the top, handed to you with a small nod. You may remember walking out with that bag, the weight of it, the sound of the bell as you left. Standing on the sidewalk outside, opening the bag, looking inside at what you'd chosen. The first piece eaten right there, the rest saved, for later, for sharing, for making last. For many, this was simply part of childhood. The corner store sold more than candy, of course. It sold everything a neighborhood might need. Bread and milk, eggs, canned goods, soap, cigarettes, newspapers, ice cream from a freezer chest, cold bottles of Coca-Cola in a red cooler. But for children, it was the candy that mattered. That's what drew you in. That's what you thought about when you had a few coins. That's what you remembered. These stores existed everywhere. In cities, on street corners, between apartment buildings, in small towns, on Main Street or just off it, in neighborhoods new and old. There was always one close enough to walk to. They had names that were simple. Miller's, the corner store, Joe's, sometimes just the family name on a hand-painted sign. Nothing fancy, nothing that needed explaining. Inside, the layout was practical. Aisles narrow, shelves packed, everything in its place because space was limited. The counter where you paid was usually near the door, a register that rang when the drawer opened, a small area where the owner could see the whole store. Behind the counter, cigarettes in cartons, cigars in boxes, pipe tobacco, matches, things kept where children couldn't reach. The owner would get them down for customers who asked. The soda cooler hummed. You could hear it from anywhere in the store. Inside, bottles stood in rows in cold water. You'd reach in, the water so cold it hurt your hand, and pull one out, wet and dripping, the cap still on. The bottle opener was attached to the side of the cooler. You'd top the cap off, it would fall into a catch below with a clink, the sound of glass on metal. You'd drink it there, standing in the store, or take it outside. The bottle had to be returned. Everyone knew that. Some will recall the comic book rack. Wire frames, spinning, comics hung by their covers. Superman, Archie, Richie Rich, Donald Duck. 10 cents, 12 cents, 15 cents as time went on. You could stand there and read without buying, if the owner didn't mind. Some didn't, some did. The bread was delivered fresh. A truck came by. The driver carried in stacked loaves, restocked the shelf, took away what hadn't sold. The store didn't bake anything. They just sold what was brought to them. Same with the milk, bottles or cartons, delivered and stocked, kept cold in a small refrigerator case. You bought what you needed for a day or two, not more. People shopped often because refrigerators at home were smaller. You bought fresh because things didn't keep as long. The wooden floor creaked when you walked on it, worn smooth in places where people walked most, near the door, in front of the counter, by the cooler. You could tell the paths people took just by looking at the floor. There might be a cat, sometimes a dog, living there in the store, sleeping in a patch of sun, moving when it needed to, mostly ignoring customers. Part of the place like the shelves and the register. The newspaper stacks sat near the door, folded and tied with string. The local paper. The big city paper if you were close enough to a city. People bought them on their way to work, on their way home, tucked them under an arm and kept walking. You may remember the sound of the store. Quiet, mostly. The hum of the cooler, the creak of the floor, the occasional ring of the register. Voices when people talked. The owner asking if you found everything. Customers saying yes or asking where something was. No music playing, no announcements, no background noise except what naturally occurred. The light inside came from windows and from bulbs hanging from the ceiling. Not bright, just enough. Dim in the corners where the shelves blocked the windows, brighter near the front. In summer, the door stayed propped open sometimes, a fan moving air around, flies getting in, the owner swatting at them with a rolled newspaper. In winter, the door stayed shut, a small heater somewhere, the windows fogging up from the temperature difference, cold air rushing in every time someone entered. People came and went all day, morning for coffee and a newspaper, lunchtime for a sandwich from the small refrigerated case, after school for candy, evening for whatever was forgotten at the bigger store, late for cigarettes or a bottle of something. The owner was there for all of it, opening in the morning, closing at night. Sometimes family helped, a wife, a son or daughter, but often it was just one person, day after day, running the place alone. For many, this was simply part of everyday life. These stores were woven into the rhythm of neighborhoods. You didn't drive there, you walked. It was close enough that it never seemed like an errand, just something you did. Ran to the corner store for milk, for bread, for whatever was needed. Children were sent on errands. Go get a loaf of bread. We need eggs. Get a newspaper. Money handed over. Sometimes exact change, sometimes more with the expectation of getting change back. You'd walk there, get what you were sent for, walk back, hand over the item and the change, the errand completed. Simple and routine. Some will recall being trusted with this, being old enough to go alone, to handle money, to remember what you were supposed to get. It was a small responsibility, but it felt important. The store owner knew the neighborhood, knew who lived where, knew the families. If someone's mother was sick, they knew. If someone's father lost his job, they knew. Not from gossip necessarily, but from observation, from small changes in what people bought and when. They might extend credit to people they knew. Pay me next week, A running tab kept in a small notebook, names and amounts, settled when people could settle them. Trust given because trust was known. This wasn't charity, it was community. People helped each other because they lived near each other, because they saw each other every day, because that's how things worked. The corner store was neutral ground, a place everyone went, different people at different times, crossing paths, nodding hello, brief exchanges. How are you? Fine, and you? Nice day. Supposed to rain tomorrow. Small talk that meant nothing and everything. Connection maintained through these tiny interactions. Proof that you were part of something, that you belonged to this place and these people. Children learned to count money there, learned to add and subtract. 3 candies at 2 cents each, that's 6 cents. I have a dime, I get 4 cents back. Math that mattered because it was real, because it affected what you could buy. They learned to make decisions, to weigh options, to understand the choices meant giving something up to get something else. You couldn't have everything, you had to pick. They learned to wait their turn, to be patient, to speak clearly when ordering, to say please and thank you. Social skills taught not through lectures but through practice, through doing. You may remember the feeling of being treated like a customer, even as a child. The owner didn't dismiss you, didn't ignore you. You had money. You were there to buy something. That made you worthy of attention. It was a small dignity, but it registered. You mattered. Your business, however small, was real business. The corner store stayed open late, later than seemed necessary, because people needed things at odd hours, because the owner lived upstairs or nearby and could, because being available was part of the service. 10 o'clock, 11 sometimes, lights on, door unlocked, someone there. If you needed something after everywhere else closed, you could go there. Milk for tomorrow's breakfast, aspirin for a headache, bread for morning toast. The store was there. This reliability mattered. In a world without 24-hour supermarkets, without convenience stores on every corner, the corner store filled a need. It was convenient in the truest sense. Convenient in proximity, convenient in hours, convenient in familiarity. Some will recall particular owners. The man who always wore a white apron, the woman who kept her hair in a tight bun, the couple who bickered good-naturedly while they worked, the quiet person who rarely spoke but always listened. These people became part of the landscape of childhood, familiar faces, constant presences, there when you were small, still there when you were older, a continuity that was comforting. When they retired or the store closed, it felt like something important was lost, and it was, not just a place to buy things, but a piece of the neighborhood itself. For many, this was simply part of everyday life. The inventory of these stores never changed much. The same brands year after year, the same products in the same places. Wonder Bread, Campbell's Soup, Coca-Cola, Lucky Strike, Ivory Soap. If you needed something unusual, something specialty, you went elsewhere. But for everyday items, the corner store had what you needed, the basics, the staples. Shelves were stocked by hand. The owner unpacking boxes, arranging items, rotating stock so older items were in front, dusting, straightening, keeping everything neat despite the limited space. The storage area was usually in back, a small room, cases of soda, extra inventory, cleaning supplies. Nothing elaborate, just functional space for what didn't fit on the shelves. Some stores had a small deli counter, cold cuts sliced to order, cheese, a few salads in metal containers, white paper wrapped around sandwiches made while you waited. Nothing fancy. Ham and cheese, turkey, egg salad. The slicer was manual or electric, depending on the era and the store. The owner knew how thick you liked things sliced. Thin, regular, thick. A quarter pound, a half pound, whatever you asked for. The scale was metal, weights and measures marked clearly. You could see what you were getting, watch it being weighed, know it was accurate. Some stores sold cigarettes individually, called loosies, one cigarette at a time. For people who couldn't afford a pack or didn't want a whole pack, 2 cents, 3 cents, however much they cost. The owner would open a pack, sell them one by one. No judgment, just business. You may remember the jar on the counter. Take a penny, leave a penny. Pennies people didn't want clutter in their pockets, left for others who might be a penny short. A small communal resource, honor system. It worked. Birthday candles sold individually, because maybe you only needed 6 or 8, however old your child was turning. You didn't need to buy a whole box. Same with greeting cards, a small selection. Birthdays, get well, sympathy. Not many, just enough. You picked one, paid for it, wrote in it at home. The phone on the wall was for the owner, but in an emergency you could use it. If something happened and you needed to call someone, the owner would let you. Maybe charge you, maybe not, depending on the situation. Before most people had phones at home, this mattered. The corner store had a phone. That meant something. It was a connection point, a way to reach the outside world if needed. Some will recall running to the corner store to call home, to tell your mother you'd be late, to ask permission for something, using the owner's phone because it was the closest one, being allowed to because the owner knew your family. The register held bills and coins, organized in their slots, 1s, 5s, 10s, quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. The owner could make change without thinking, muscle memory. Count it back into your hand. The register drawer stayed open sometimes when it was busy, easier than opening and closing it constantly. The owner kept an eye on it. Customers did too, everyone watching out. Theft was rare, but it happened, same as anywhere. Most people were honest. Most transactions were straightforward. Money for goods, simple exchange, trust on both sides. At the end of the day, the owner counted the register, sorted the bills, rolled the coins, made a deposit, or kept it in a safe, started fresh the next morning. Day after day, week after week, year after year. For many, this was simply part of everyday life. The corner store was where you learned the value of money, a tangible education. You saw what things cost. You calculated what you could afford. You made choices based on real limitations. A candy bar cost a nickel. A soda cost a dime. A comic book cost 12 cents. These weren't abstract numbers. They were real. They determined what you could have. When prices went up, even a little, you noticed. That candy bar now costs 6 cents. You adjusted, got one less piece of candy, chose something cheaper, made it work with what you had. This taught you something, not through lectures or lessons, but through experience. You learned that money was finite, that choices had consequences, that you couldn't have everything you wanted. Some will recall saving up for something, collecting pennies and nickels over days or weeks, counting them out on your bed, planning what you'd buy when you had enough. The anticipation of that, the discipline of not spending what you were saving, the satisfaction when you finally had enough and could walk to the store and buy whatever you'd been wanting. Maybe it was a particular toy, a special candy, a comic book you'd been eyeing. Whatever it was, earning it made it matter more. The corner store was where you learned to interact with adults outside your family. The owner was neither parent nor teacher. They were something else, a business person, someone you had a transaction with. You learned to speak up, to make yourself understood, to state what you wanted clearly. "I'd like this, please." Not mumbling, not pointing, using words. You learned to be polite, because rudeness wasn't tolerated, because the owner would correct you if you forgot your manners. "What do you say?" Reminding you to say thank you, to say please. These interactions were brief but consistent. Every time you went to the store, you practiced how to behave, how to conduct yourself, small lessons in being a person in the world. You may remember the store being different depending on who else was there. Quieter when empty, more energetic when full. Waiting your turn when adults were being helped, knowing that you came after them in the order of importance. This wasn't unfair, it was just how it was. Adults had priority. Children waited. And when it was your turn, you got the same attention they had gotten. The store closed on certain days, Sundays maybe, or early on certain evenings. A sign on the door, closed, hours posted. You learned to plan around that, to know when it would be open and when it wouldn't. If you went and it was closed, you walked back home, waited until it reopened. No other option. You couldn't call ahead, you couldn't check online, you just went and hoped. This taught you patience, taught you that the world didn't revolve around your immediate needs, that sometimes you had to wait, that waiting was just part of life. Some will recall the seasons changing and the stores staying the same place through summer heat and winter cold, always there, always familiar. Different items appearing seasonally, fireworks before the 4th of July, candy corn in October, candy canes in December. Small acknowledgments of the calendar, but mostly the store stayed constant. That constancy was comforting. Everything else might change. You grew older, your family changed, the neighborhood changed, but the corner store remained a fixed point. Until it didn't. For many, this was simply part of everyday life. The corner store began to disappear slowly, not all at once, but over years, decades. Supermarkets grew bigger, offered more, cost less per item. People started driving to them, buying in bulk, shopping once a week instead of every day. The convenience of the corner store became less necessary. People had cars, had bigger refrigerators, could store more at home, didn't need to walk to the store as often. The owners aged, retired. Their children didn't want to take over, didn't want the long hours, the 7-day weeks, the small profit margins. One by one, stores closed, buildings sold, converted to other uses, or left empty. You may remember when the corner store near you closed. The sign coming down, the windows going dark, the door locked permanently. Walking past it and feeling the absence, that place you'd gone to countless times, now gone, replaced by nothing or by something that wasn't the same. Some people missed it more than others. Older folks who had relied on it, who couldn't drive to the supermarket, who had known the owner for decades. Children who wouldn't have that same experience, who'd grow up going to chain stores with their parents, buying candy and packages from big displays, never knowing what it was like to choose penny candy from glass jars. The loss was more than just a store. It was a piece of community infrastructure, a gathering point, a familiar face, a place that knew you. Some will recall feeling that something important had been lost, even if they couldn't quite articulate what. A sense that the neighborhood was less connected, less complete. New stores opened sometimes, convenience stores, franchises. They sold similar items, soda, candy, newspapers, but they weren't the same. The person behind the counter was an employee working a shift, didn't know your name, didn't live in the neighborhood, was there because it was a job, not because it was their life. The inventory was corporate, standardized, same products in the same places in every store across the country, efficient, professional, impersonal. You could buy what you needed, but the experience was different, transactional in a colder way, no relationship, no history, just commerce. For many, this was simply how things changed. And the person who ran it. Remember being a child with a few coins, standing in front of that candy counter, making a decision that felt important. Remember the bell above the door, the creaking floor, the smell, the coolness of a glass bottle pulled from the water, the weight of a paper bag with penny candy inside. Remember walking there on summer evenings, after school, on Saturday mornings, anytime you needed something or just wanted to go. Remember it being there, always there, part of the neighborhood, part of childhood, part of what it meant to grow up in that time and place. The corner store is mostly gone now, replaced by bigger things, more efficient things, things that serve a purpose, but serve it differently. What remains is memory, the sense of what it was like, the feeling of being known, of belonging to a place small enough that the person selling you candy knew your name. That particular kind of connection isn't common anymore, not in the same way, not in the daily routine of buying milk or bread or a piece of candy. But for those who experienced it, it left an impression, a warmth, a sense that commerce could be personal, that a store could be more than just a place to buy things. It could be a neighbor, a friend, a constant presence in a changing world. And perhaps that's worth remembering. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was real, it was human, it was small-scale life where people knew each other, where transactions came with recognition, where children learned and adults belonged, and everyone had a place. The corner store, the penny candy, the bell above the door, the person who knew your name. It was simply part of life. And then it wasn't. But the memory remains, warm and sweet, like candy from a paper bag, chosen carefully, savored slowly, gone too soon. The paper bag itself was part of the experience. Small, brown, sometimes with grease stains from previous use. The owner would shake it open with a quick snap of the wrist, a practiced motion done thousands of times. The bag would stand up on its own for a moment while candy was dropped inside. You could hear the pieces landing, a soft sound, different depending on what you'd chosen. Hard candies made a sharper noise. Gum made almost no sound at all. Licorice whips had to be folded to fit. When the bag was handed to you, you'd look inside immediately, confirming what was there, seeing the colors, the shapes, already deciding which piece you'd eat first. Some children saved their candy, made it last for days, rationed it out. One piece after lunch, one piece after dinner. The bag kept in a special place, a drawer, a shoebox, somewhere safe where siblings couldn't find it. Others ate it all at once, sitting on the curb outside the store, going through piece after piece until the bag was empty and their tongue was stained red or blue or green from the dye. There was no right way, just your way. And the owner didn't judge, didn't tell you how to enjoy what you'd bought. They just provided it. The rest was up to you. You may remember comparing candy with friends. What did you get? What did I get? Want a trade? 2 of mine for 1 of yours. Negotiations conducted with the seriousness of international diplomacy. Trading was part of it. Someone always wanted what someone else had. The grass always seemed sweeter in someone else's paper bag. So you traded, swapped, evened things out. Sometimes you got the better deal. Sometimes you didn't. But the trading itself was fun. The interaction, the back and forth, the satisfaction of a deal agreed upon. For many, this was simply part of childhood. The candy counter changed with the seasons, though not dramatically. Summer might bring more sour candies, lemon drops, citrus flavors, things that seemed right for hot weather. Winter might mean more chocolate, peppermint, flavors associated with holidays. Though chocolate was tricky, it melted in summer. Stores in warm climates sold less of it when the weather turned hot. Halloween meant candy corn appeared, those tri-colored triangles, waxy and sweet. Some people loved them, others couldn't stand them. No middle ground. Christmas brought ribbon candy, delicate and striped, pretty to look at, broke easily. Tasted like sugar and not much else, but it was traditional, so stores carried it. Valentine's Day meant conversation hearts, small pastel candies with messages printed on them. Be mine, true love, sweet talk. You bought them, read them, maybe gave them to someone, maybe just ate them yourself. Easter brought malted milk eggs, jelly beans, marshmallow chicks covered in colored sugar. The store would have a small display, nothing elaborate, just a section of seasonal items. But mostly the candy stayed the same year-round. The standards, the classics, the ones that sold consistently. Those were always there. Some will recall having a favorite, one type of candy you always got, your regular order. The owner learned it, started to expect it, sometimes had it ready before you even asked. That recognition felt good, being known, being anticipated. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The price of penny candy was in the name, a penny, 1 cent for 1 piece. Simple math. If you had 5 pennies, you could get 5 pieces. But over time, prices crept up. Inflation happened. Candy that cost a penny started costing 2 pennies, then 3. The name penny candy stuck anyway. The concept remained even when the price didn't. By the late 50s and into the 60s, most candy was 2 for a penny, or a penny each for the cheaper varieties. 3 cents for the better ones, 5 cents for something special. Children adjusted, recalculated, figured out the new math, what they could get for what they had. The principle stayed the same, even if the numbers changed. You may remember the disappointment when your usual amount of money didn't buy what it used to, when you could suddenly afford less, when you had to make harder choices. But you adapted. Everyone did. That's what you did when things changed. You accepted it and moved on. The corner store owner sometimes gave children extra, a piece more than they paid for. Not always, not to everyone, but sometimes. When they did, it felt like winning something, like luck, like being favored. You didn't expect it, so when it happened, it was a gift. Here, take one more, dropping an extra piece into your bag, a small kindness that cost almost nothing but meant something to a child. Maybe they did it because business was good that day. Maybe because you reminded them of their grandchild. Maybe just because they felt like it. The reason didn't matter. The gesture did. Some will recall those moments with particular clarity. The surprise of it, the gratitude, the feeling of being smiled upon by the universe, even in the smallest way. These small interactions built something, a sense of goodwill, of community, of people being decent to one another in minor but meaningful ways. The corner store was where you learned that not everyone outside your family was a stranger to be feared, that adults in your neighborhood were generally safe, generally kind, generally willing to help if you needed it. The owner was proof of that. They were there, consistently, reliably, not a threat, just a person doing their job, a person who knew you and treated you fairly. This built trust, a foundation of understanding that the world beyond your front door wasn't inherently dangerous, that community existed, that you belonged to it. Children were sent to the corner store alone from a young age, 6, 7, 8 years old, walking by themselves, crossing streets, handling money, making purchases, returning home. This wasn't considered risky. It was normal, expected, part of growing up, learning independence, learning responsibility. And generally, that trust was warranted. Children made these trips thousands of times without incident. The corner store was a safe destination, a known quantity. You may remember the pride of being trusted with this task, of being old enough to go alone, of handling money, of completing the errand successfully. It was a rite of passage, a marker of growing up. You were sent to the corner store alone, and you came back. You proved you could do it, and then you kept doing it. For many, this was simply part of childhood. The store had regulars, people who came every day, same time, same purchases. The owner knew them by sight, by habit, knew what they'd want before they asked. The man who bought a newspaper and a pack of cigarettes every morning at 7, the woman who came for milk every afternoon at 3, the teenager who got a Coke after school every weekday. These patterns created a rhythm. The owner could almost tell time by who walked through the door, the day organized by familiar faces appearing in familiar sequences. When a regular didn't show up, it was noticed. Where's Joe? Haven't seen him in a few days. Is he all right? This noticing mattered. It meant people were paying attention. That absence registered. Sometimes the owner would mention it to another regular. Have you seen so-and-so? Not sure. I'll check. And someone would knock on a door, make sure everything was okay. This informal network of care existed because people saw each other regularly, because the corner store was a gathering point, a place where absence was noted and sometimes acted upon. It wasn't official, wasn't organized, just people looking out for one another because they shared space, because they were neighbors in the truest sense. Some will recall stories of the store owner finding out someone was sick and bringing them soup or medicine, or just checking in. going beyond the role of shopkeeper into something more personal. Not everyone did this, but some did, and when they did, it reinforced the sense that this place was more than a business. It was a community anchor. The store was also where news spread. Gossip, if you want to call it that, but also information. Someone was getting married, someone had a baby, someone passed away, someone's son was coming home from the service. News traveled through the store, shared between customers, passed from the owner to whoever asked. Not malicious, just information. The way people stayed connected before phones were common, before social media existed. You learned what was happening in your neighborhood by going to the corner store, by talking to the owner, by overhearing conversations, by being present in a communal space. This made you feel connected, part of something larger than your own household, aware of the lives around you, invested in your neighbor's fortunes, good and bad. The bulletin board, if there was one, served a similar purpose. Handwritten index cards pinned up, room for rent, used bicycle for sale, lost cat, babysitter available. People posted notices, other people read them, connections were made, problems were solved, all through a piece of paper tacked to a corkboard in a corner store. No algorithms, no targeted advertising, just simple direct communication. I need this, I have that, let's make an arrangement. You may remember checking that board, seeing what was new, reading the notices even if you weren't looking for anything in particular, just being curious, just being engaged with your community. The payphone outside some stores was another connection point. Before most homes had phones, before cell phones existed, the payphone was how you called someone if you weren't home. A phone booth, or just a phone mounted on the outside wall. You dropped in a dime, later a quarter, dialed the number, talked for a few minutes, hung up. If you needed to reach someone and you weren't home, you walked to the corner store and used that phone. It was expected. It was there for that purpose. The phone book hung on a chain, thick and yellow, pages worn from use. You looked up a number if you didn't know it, dialed carefully, waited for someone to answer. These phones were semi-public. People walking by could hear your conversation. You kept things brief, spoke clearly, conducted your business, and moved on. Some will recall important calls made from these phones, telling someone you'd be late, calling home to ask permission, reaching out in an emergency. The corner store phone was a lifeline in its own way. The store itself was built to last, solid construction, brick or wood, nothing fancy but nothing flimsy either. These buildings stood for decades, some for a century or more. The floors were wood or tile, worn down by foot traffic, stained in places, but sturdy, cleaned regularly, swept every day, mopped when needed. The ceiling was high, usually, pressed tin in older stores, plaster in newer ones, light fixtures hanging down, simple and functional. The walls might have advertisements, painted signs for Coca-Cola or Chesterfield cigarettes, metal signs for various products. These signs stayed up for years, became part of the decor. Some stores had a pot-bellied stove for heat in winter. Men would gather around it sometimes, warming their hands, talking, the store serving as an informal social club. The stove might have a checkerboard nearby, or just chairs, a place to sit, to rest, to pass time. The owner allowed it because it was neighborly, because those men would buy something eventually. For many, this was simply part of everyday life. The rhythm of the corner store followed the rhythm of the neighborhood. Busy in mornings when people needed coffee and newspapers, quiet mid-morning when everyone was at work or school. Busy again at lunch, then quiet, then busy after school when children descended for candy. Quiet during dinner, busy again in early evening when people needed last-minute items. Late evening brought a different crowd. People finishing work, stopping for cigarettes or a cold drink.
the store emptying out as the hour got later, finally closing when the last customer left. The owner locked the door, counted the register, straightened up, prepared for tomorrow. The same routine every single day.
Some will recall the gradual decline, the shelves getting emptier, the hours getting shorter, the sense that the end was coming. And then, one day, it was closed. A sign in the window, going out of business, or just locked doors and dark windows. The bell didn't ring anymore. The floor didn't creak. The candy jars sat empty. For many, this was simply how things ended. But the memory persists. The corner store lives on in the minds of those who knew it, who shopped there, who bought penny candy and cold Cokes and newspapers. They remember the smell, the sound, the feeling of being there. They remember the owner, their name, their face, the way they greeted customers. They remember being children with a few coins, standing at that candy counter, making choices that felt important. They remember the bell, the bag, the walk home. They remember when neighborhoods had corner stores, when shopping was a daily activity, when commerce was personal. They remember a time that's gone now, a way of life that's vanished, replaced by something more efficient but less intimate. And sometimes, in quiet moments, they miss it. Not desperately, not constantly, but gently, the way you miss anything that was good and is gone. The corner store, the penny candy, the person who knew your name. It was there, and then it wasn't. But it mattered while it lasted. It was part of the fabric of daily life, a thread in the larger tapestry of community. When it disappeared, the tapestry frayed a little. The pattern changed. Something was lost that couldn't quite be replaced. But those who remember carry it with them, in their memories, in their hearts, in the stories they tell their grandchildren. About a time when stores were small and personal, when owners knew their customers, when children walked alone to buy candy. About a simpler time. Maybe not a better time, but a different one. A time worth remembering. The corner store stands in memory now, preserved there, perfect in recollection. The bell still rings, the floor still creaks, the candy jars are still full. The owner is still there, still smiling, still asking what you'd like today. And you're a child again, with coins in your pocket, standing at that counter, making that choice. One more time, just one more time, before the bell rings and you walk back out into a world that's moved on.